October 4th, 2025, 4:31 a.m., Lake Onega, Republic of Karelia. It was supposed to be the safest place in Russia, an inland lake hundreds of kilometers from any front line, where war felt like a distant rumor. Yet, as the sun set over Lake Onega, a ship worth nearly $180 million rested quietly at anchor, unaware that it was being watched. The Grad, a missile corvette, armed with long-range cruise missiles, had slipped into these calm northern waters, believing it was untouchable. It was a symbol of Russian naval confidence, protected by geography, distance, and the illusion of safety. But Ukraine had been waiting, patiently, precisely, for this moment. What happened next would rewrite every assumption about where war can reach. Before dawn, the still surface of Lake Onega reflected the faint lights of the corvette one last time. In the darkness beyond, something was moving, small, silent, and invisible to radar. What followed wasn't just another strike. It was the moment modern warfare crossed a new line, proving that even Russia's deepest heartland could become a battlefield. The ship was the Grad, a small missile corvette configured as a mobile launcher for long-range cruise missiles. On paper, it was a compact threat with outsized reach, a platform that could project force while hiding in plain sight among inland waterways. Its displacement sat under 1,000 tons, its value measured in well over $180 million, its purpose to wait, to survive, and to fire when called. Tonight, it did only one of those. Lake Onega is more than a body of water. It is a segment of a logistics vein that ties the Baltic to the White Sea through canals and locks that were engineered generations ago. The route had long been considered a quiet artery, out of sight, out of range, and out of mind. That assumption created a new map in planners' heads, a map where blue water turned into sanctuary. The Grad's anchor dropped into that illusion and held. The northern night carried the low hum of auxiliary generators and the distant clank of lock machinery settling after a late passage. Watch officers traced arcs with eyes trained for predictable threats from predictable directions. The idea that danger might rise inside the perimeter, born from silence, did not fit doctrine, it fit the coming hour. The first sign did not blink on a radar tube, it whispered through spectrum, far to the south and east. Analysts monitoring fragments of encrypted chatter saw a pattern repeat in an unexpected place. A frequency family associated with Naval Command relayed messages that should have belonged to a coastal fleet but appeared in the northwestern interior. An anomaly becomes a lead when it repeats. This one repeated enough. Over several days, teams correlated emissions with commercial imagery. Vessels along the canal were tagged, sorted, and eliminated until one silhouette remained. A compact warship anchored off regular traffic. Thermal frames taken hours apart showed a warm core and a sleeping perimeter. The profile matched open sources and prior reconnaissance. A name was unnecessary. The capability was the point. Local sources added texture without knowing their part. A contractor mentioned spare parts routed by rail to a lakeside facility. A driver noted a convoy that crossed at night with armed escort. Small facts, insignificant alone, aligned into a composite. They suggested a vessel at low readiness, crew dispersed, defenses idling to conserve wear and powers. In war, idling creates opportunity. Direct assault by conventional missiles was impractical. High-altitude routes would be seen. Mid-altitude routes would be tracked. Even low-altitude profiles would risk early detection by overlapping radars tied into a broader air defense lattice. The only workable path was not to avoid the lattice, but to trick it into watching the wrong sky at the right time. Planners built a plan around timing and perception. The defense in depth relied on cues, on hierarchies, on sensors supporting other sensors. When those cues are fed noise, the tree hesitates. When it hesitates, a window opens that lasts seconds yet matters more than hours. Those seconds became the target, not the ship itself. The ship would follow. The strike package was lean. A long-range attack drone with a compact, high-explosive payload would do the damage. Two smaller decoy drones configured with modular jamming suites would behave like loud intruders. The path to the lake traced ravines, forests, and low-rising ground, obeying contours more than waypoints. Altitude mattered more than speed. Silence mattered most of all. Navigation could not depend on a single crutch. Inertial guidance traced the line, even if signals were lost. A terrain reference routine compared stored contours to measured altitude and slid the aircraft along valleys invisible to long-range search beams. In the terminal phase, an electro-optical seeker would compare what it saw with what it expected and close the loop without radio. The decoys climbed purposely into view where watch stations were most confident. They presented as neat targets with sharp returns that fit a mental template for incoming threats. Their transmitters did not flood the spectrum. They pricked it at specific frequencies that stitched together the local picture into something slightly wrong. Slightly wrong is harder to trust than clearly false. Operators responded as training demanded. Batteries near infrastructure tracked the louder contacts and allocated engagement cycles. The command layer reviewed conflicting cues and requested confirmation from neighboring sectors. Confirmation takes time. Time is what the quiet intruder required. As the dialogue rose, the drone below the conversation kept its own counsel and advanced. Fog draped the water in sheets when the strike drone reached the lake's edge. Its seeker switched to a tighter frame, hunting for heat signatures consistent with a ship whose machinery had been running at idle. The outline that emerged was small compared to ocean combatants, but large against the empty water. The algorithm assigned it confidence and recalculated the path to a point low and aft. On board the corvette, operators tried to clear residual clutter left over from earlier interference. Cross-checks with adjacent nodes were delayed by congestion. Local sensors remained in standby on reduced power, a routine economy when threat levels are assessed as minimal. Anomalous returns at low altitude appeared and faded in a band often discounted as surface noise. Surface noise became signal too late. The impact angle was chosen to punch through thin plating near machinery spaces rather than reinforced magazines. The object that mattered most was the generator cluster that fed not only propulsion, but pumps, stabilizers, and firefighting. A hit that kills electricity also kills the tools meant to survive the hit. Redundancy delays failure. It does not guarantee escape. The detonation was not the largest of the war, but it was brutally efficient. The blast forced burning fuel and hot fragments through compartments designed for peacetime maintenance, not wartime punishment. Doors intended to slow fire-faced heat they were not built to withstand. Flame paths that were theoretical on paper became visible lines drawn up ladders and along cable runs. Damage control teams acted with professionalism born of drills, yet drills presuppose systems that answer. With power gone, pumps did not start when switches were thrown. With lines cut, comms distorted orders into noise. With smoke filling passages, routes mapped during daylight turned into instinct and touch. Training meets friction. Friction usually wins the first round. Shore stations registered the failure before the crew understood the full extent. A transponder winked out. A voice channel went dead mid-sentence. A thermal bloom climbed rapidly and then steadied at a temperature associated with hydrocarbon fire. In a control room far away, someone drew a line through a unit symbol and wrote a single word next to it. The word meant unavailable. The cost accounting began in parallel with the smoke. The platform's price was counted in hundreds of millions of dollars. The munitions price was counted in a small fraction of that. The ratio did not require spreadsheets to be understood. In modern conflict, asymmetry is achieved when precision is affordable and defense is expensive, when the defense must be always right and the offense must be right once. Strategically, the strike reached beyond the ship. It telegraphed that inland water was no longer a sanctuary defined by geography. Maps that once guided allocation of scarce air defense assets had to be redrawn. Commanders faced a choice between thickening the perimeter around cities and routes deep inside the country, or preserving density near fronts already stressed by daily attrition. Either choice weakened something. Psychologically, the event compressed distance. Citizens in northern cities who treated war as a southern headline saw images of a burning ship on a lake they knew from summer maps. The abstract turned concrete. Assurances that layered defenses could filter every threat no longer felt absolute. Absolute promises are brittle under stress. Brittle things break loudly. Doctrinally, the night exposed a lag between threat evolution and procedure. Air defense networks are extraordinary machines when the opponent plays inside old assumptions. They are less certain when adversaries split their salvos into quiet and loud, when noise is weaponized to make speed irrelevant. The system worked as designed. The design met a problem it did not anticipate. For the attackers, the lessons were as valuable as the damage. The coordination between decoy timing and penetration altitude proved repeatable. The Seeker's terminal logic handled reflections from a calm lake without false locks. The inertial drift over a long flight stayed inside the tolerance required to put the final turn within sight of the target. Every green light in testing mattered in combat. For the defenders, the checklist grew longer. More radar pickets, more overlapping angles, upper immobile short-range guns on alert near infrastructure, more power redundancy on moored units, more skepticism toward conveniently loud targets. Each addition consumes budget, personnel, and attention. The offense's central advantage is choosing when and where to pay its price. The defense pays continuously. The geography of the canal system once suggested safety. Now it suggests routes. Long stretches of forested banks and low shorelines allow low-altitude ingress paths that can curve and fold under coverage lobes. Locks, once only civil engineering, become timing gates for reconnaissance. Bridges cast radar shadows. Every structure built for commerce offers traits a planner can use. The ship itself told a cautionary tale about readiness. Peacetime conservation practices like limiting wear on sensors and keeping close-in systems unpowered at anchor save hours on maintenance logs and extend service life. In wartime, those saved hours can become seconds lost when alarms demand immediate activation. The balance between longevity and responsiveness is not static. It tilts with threat. The aftermath on the water lasted hours. Fireboats arrived from shore, their pumps audible long before lights cut the fog. By then, the core blaze had eaten through key spaces and softened metal into shapes engineers study later to map heat flow. The hull settled by degrees, not with a dramatic rush. Catastrophe is often a slow physics class, conducted in smoke and steam. Imagery collected after sunrise showed scorch marks radiating from vents near the stern and a discoloration pattern along the deck that traced the path of the fire. The ship's profile sagged where support had failed. Around it, the lake returned to quiet, with the indifference only nature sustains. Ripples erased a night of tactics, as if it were a skipped stone. In command posts, staff rebuilt status boards and reassigned tasks once handled by the lost platform. Another vessel would be asked to cover a gap. Another escort would be pulled from a different mission to protect a different route. The ripple inside the order of battle spread wider than a single lake. Even a small corvette can anchor a plan. Removal forces improvisation. Long-term impacts reach budgets and calendars. Replacement timelines measured in months for machinery and in years for hulls are poor fits for weeks of operational demand. Sanctions and supply constraints add wait time that cannot be compressed by urgency. Training pipelines cannot conjure experienced crews on short notice. Strategic depth exists in factories and classrooms, more than on maps. The strike fit an emerging pattern in which persistence and ingenuity outvalue size. Drones with modest warheads leverage precision to deliver effects out of proportion to weight. Electronic warfare applies pressure at the seams rather than at the strongest links. Intelligence fuses civilian and military sources into a picture detailed enough to steer a single airframe through a continent's worth of sensors. Countermeasures will adapt. Defenders will add passive sensors, deploy more optical posts, push for autonomous guns that wake in seconds, and write new rules that reduce latency and authorization. Offense will respond by splitting signatures further, by using terrain smarter, by building cheaper. The cycle is older than aviation. What is new is how fast it turns and how far it reaches. The human dimension remains constant beneath the systems. Sailors move toward heat with extinguishers and masks because training told them to run toward the problem. Operators sifted clutter for meaning until meaning arrived as a bright blue where a friendly symbol had been. Analysts compared before and after frames, knowing that pixels can describe lives. War reduces to tasks. Tasks add up to consequence. By mid-morning, smoke thinned into a pale sheet above the lake. Recovery crews measured hazards. photographed compartments, and logged serial numbers for forms that track loss more than they track blame. The facts on those forms are dry. The implications are not. A ship believed to be safe inside a country's interior was struck by a weapon launched far away and guided by math and patience. The message did not end at a shoreline. It traveled along planning tables and through procurement offices where priorities are written in the columns. Protecting what was once assumed safe will cost money and men and time. Leaving it unprotected will cost more later. Choices like these define campaigns even when no headlines attach themselves to the decisions. The Grad was not the first loss of the war, and it will not be the last. It is, however, a clear sentence in a long report. 4:31 a.m. became a shorthand for a turning point on a quiet lake where the idea of safety had stood unchallenged. Minutes later, the idea burned. In the days that followed, maps were redrawn with thicker lines around places that once merited thin ones. The lake remained dark and cold and beautiful. The war, indifferent to beauty, adjusted and moved on. By afternoon, assessments converge on the same conclusion. The loss reshaped allocation across the entire theater. Groups that once guarded coastal corridors were retasked to inland nodes. Convoy schedules were rewritten, refueling plans adjusted. Patrol orbits stretched thinner. Every adjustment carried second-order effects that planners would feel for weeks. The paradox of defense repeated itself again. Protecting everything equally meant protecting nothing well. In technical circles, the strike became a case study. Engineers mapped failure cascades from a single penetration to total systems collapse, then listed mitigations that sounded simple and proved hard. Hardened cabling routes, automatic fire curtains, independent emergency pumps with mechanical starts, optical watch posts that do not depend on contested spectrum. None were novel. All demanded discipline, resources, and habits that must hold at 4 a.m. when routine feels safe. Operational thinkers sketched new playbooks. They emphasized silent ingress, orchestrated distraction, patient confirmation, and terminal guidance that does not beg for permission from distant signals. They also emphasized counters, more passive sensors, shorter command chains for point defense, realistic drills where alarms erupt from the least likely bearing. The lesson was not that defense fails, but that defense must evolve as quickly as the threat that tests it. The sailors who fought the fire and the operators who pieced together the night's picture will carry different memories, none of them cinematic. For them, the strike was weight, heat, noise, and the stubbornness of systems that would not answer. For analysts and commanders, it was a data point that forced hard choices. For the wider world, it was proof that the interior is not immune, that reach now outpaces borders cut by hand on old maps. Night returned to Lake Onega with a quiet that did not restore what was lost. The channel markers blinked in their steady rhythm, indifferent to lessons learned ashore. The coordinates where steel softened into shapes had already faded beneath a skin of ripples. If there was a single sentence left by the event, it was this: distance no longer decides.